Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in again to Sylvie and Peter talking about mental health in the workplace. And as you know, we try to pick different topics that are either topical, excuse the pun, or something that we think we do need to talk about that maybe enough people don't. And as you know, we've been around a while and we haven't always been therapists, but we chose to retrain at some point later in our careers. So we understand business, we understand mental health. And the stuff we're going to talk about today is what I hear a lot from business owners or chief execs when the mental health thing comes up and people who understand mental health turn up and say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And that is the rebuttal immediately. Don't tell me how to run my business. And I know this from my past as a supply chain consultant, where effectively we do criticize how someone is running their business because we get called in to make improvements. But the intention is not to criticize. The intention is to be helpful and to take that business to the next level. But it can very often come across as someone telling a seasoned CEO how to run their business. And that's so wrong. That's not what we want to do. And the next pushback I get is, oh, all those bloody do-gooders. I am fed up with yoga teachers or mindfulness people and ex-sports people, ex-military people who believe that they know everything about team building and teamwork and running a business. Who are they? Why do they try and tell me how to run my business? And it's a valid point, actually, isn't it? Are all of these do-gooders in mental health and well-being, are they actually qualified to speak to seasoned business people about their business? Have you come across something similar?
Yeah, it's an interesting point because, I've heard very similar before. The pushback often from business leaders, what do they know about running a business? Don't tell me how to run it. It's all very well talking about mental health and well-being with all your ideas around having yoga sessions and mindfulness sessions, which is great. However, I have a business to run. I have P&L to make. I have targets to meet and deadlines to meet. And it's, coming at from different angles, and I know my own self that quite a few people have said in the past, oh, just do this and just do that. And it doesn't actually work when you translate that into a business environment. And the business leaders, you have that pushback, well, you don't understand what it's like to be in a results-driven environment. And then you've got the other side saying, well, you should just be able to get up and leave at 5 o'clock. That's your deadline. That's your going home time. But it doesn't work like that. And again, you have this conflict going on rather than, to your point, someone coming in from an angle of improvement, betterment, encourage the business leaders. You're doing great, to be even better if. And I think perhaps it says something about the business leaders not wanting to accept what's being said by the other side because of coming from a completely different angle. I think if the business leaders heard this from people that, like ourselves, who boundary span both business and the mental health side. So you have this coming from an angle of actually, we do actually know what it's like to be in business. Mm-hmm. We have both sides of the coin, so to speak, of knowledge and experience and understanding. I think that's what could make a difference to getting those messages across.
What I also find is it being mental health as a concept is being perceived as yet another thing on top of what I already do.
Yeah.
And, it is not, because mental health and well-being has always been there. It's just been dealt with rather badly in many organizations and not seen as something that needed any focus or attention. We learn how to do physical health. We learn how to lift heavy things in the proper way. but we have never really been too bothered about how this one up here works and whether it's good or bad for business. So when this new army of well-meaning individuals, such as you and I, we have to include ourselves in this whole thing, turn up on companies' doorstep and say, you know what, we know better. We know that if you look after the mental health and well-being of everybody in your organization, your business will be better than it is. Right, okay. Well, how do you know that then? But the book says, or statistics say. So it's a difficult one to sell, because we have been taught through generations that business is something focused, hard, sometimes ruthless, where there is no time for consideration of how other people feel.
It's interesting there, because what's popped up for me there is the language, the nomenclature that we use. Perhaps if we dropped, and I suppose this might be a little bit counterintuitive, but if we dropped words like mental health and well-being, and use more day-to-day language like okay to a business leader, are your staff okay? And I think I've mentioned this before, a happy crew is a productive crew. So make sure, are all your employees okay? Because when they're okay, performance and productivity is maintained, improved even, and increases. You create an environment and a culture where people want to stay. You encourage a good place to work. And rather than using mental health, whereas in business, oh, here we go again. Whereas if you use different language, and perhaps that's one of the keys, is using behavior flexibility in the language that we use when talking to these business leaders, to make sure we use language that they connect with, that they engage with, rather than disengage with.
That is a very good point, up to a point.
Yes, exactly.
Because I think if we talk too much business speak, we put our own message further out the window than is good. Because, you know, as we've talked about before, you and I, that poor mental health is a huge business risk. And of course, the opposite side of that coin is that there's an extremely good business case for good mental health in the business. That goes without saying, and everyone who has a good handle on their mental health and well-being in their businesses will testify to how much easier they are to run and how successful they are. So we know that, but we also know that although to you and I, business is not about business, it's about relationships and people. Well, it is also about the numbers on the bottom line. We can't get past that point. It's a fair point. So if you and I go out and talk about, well, you know what, your ROI could be so much better if you introduced mental health and well-being in your organization, then the motivation becomes money, not being human to humans. And that's where I think the wheels come off the wagon a little bit, because we try to motivate business leaders to do the right thing by human beings, and the carrot being better numbers on the bottom line. And then we do ourselves as mental health professionals a disservice, because it's not about money, it's about people, and then the money will follow.
Yeah, it is a fine line, and I think that's where the behaviour flexibility comes in, is knowing when it's appropriate to do so, and when it's not appropriate to use that language. You know, whether we use mental health or whether we use okay position, and I think that's the skill and the art of both sides to work out what's the sort of the best way to negotiate that dialogue going forward. But I think, you know, as you say, in terms of, I think we've spoken about this before, you know, a lot of people can overcomplicate things. We're simply talking about human beings, their mental well-being, the most glorious attribute they have is what goes on up here. Yes. And if we can tap into that on a employee level, all the way up the chain level to the boards and the business leaders, that this makes a hell of a difference to on so many levels. Bottom line, good reputation, brand, employee retention, employees being okay, being mentally healthy, whatever phrase you want to use. And I think that's where then we can, instead of it being a conflict between the two, that's where we could find some middle ground for them business leaders to start listening to the messages that the mental health and well-being sector professionals are bringing to the table.
And I think this is where we do need to start. We need to start at the bottom and make a case for start with the basic stuff. Don't go and buy the shiny box with all the features that cost you a fortune every month in subscriptions and what have you. Start with your own attitude. What is it really you want? If you were sitting in somebody else's chair, how would you like to be treated? Because there's an awful lot we can do in terms of our attitude to how we treat other people, in our attitude to what business is. And if we start there and bring it all back down to earth and realize that you're only where you are in the business because other people are where they are, and that without everybody else you wouldn't exist, and they probably wouldn't exist without you. Just treat everybody as if they have a point and a purpose, and gradually you will see the whole mentality in the place change when you become the human being rather than the cold-faced, stern manager or boss. Because compassion is something, as another big word, that is loved by those who don't get it and not so loved by those it is expected from. And it doesn't mean saying yes to everything. No. It doesn't mean just giving in and let the employees take over the running of the business. It's not an open door to anarchy or anything. It just means accepting and realizing that everybody is a human being. They have good days, bad days. They're productive more some days than others. And that it goes for yourself as well as the top of the tree person.
And I wonder whether, what was a few things coming up while you were talking there? And I wonder if there's some pushback from business leaders because, people will come in and say, you can do this, this and this, and they, this is going to cost me money. This is going to cost me money. An app or this or that, something else. But the point we're making, and to your point, and also from my point of view, it's the simplest of changes. It's the simple changes that made such a huge difference. Minimum input, maximum output, and kindness, compassion. There's that phrase, nice to be nice, and sometimes in business, we all get a bit fraught. If I've got a $150 million payment to get out in 5 minutes time, it's not going to be pleased with you mind awfully, be really good at it. But it's accepting that in those moments we get a bit tense and a bit fraught, but there's no personal message behind that. And I just wonder whether people think this is going to cost money, and yet things like attitude, our way of being, our approach to people, how we talk to people, how we communicate, costs nothing. So
no, it doesn't.
Not a big financial investment, and yet the return can be so huge.
It can be, and like you, I advocate all the things that do not cost money, and I can hear people screaming, shouting at the screen now saying, yes, Peter, it does cost money because I'm inviting you in to help me figure it out, and that costs money. That is true, but it's a very small short-term investment for a huge long-term gain. And some of the reluctance I get is, well, I can't afford this now. When am I going to get my money back? And you will, but you won't get them back tomorrow. It is a short-term investment for a long-term solution and benefit. And talk about short-term and long-term, I don't know about your coffee, but mine is gone. And
yes.
Other people's coffees might have gone cold. So let's leave these thoughts and invite all your comments. And as usual, drop us a message, make a comment. And it's been good to see you again. Thank you for watching.
Okay. Yeah. Bye. Thanks a lot. Cheerio. Bye-bye.